A big round welcome to Chris Bohjalian and Senator Patrick Leahy.
Thank you, Tom. It is a pleasure and its honor is a privilege to share the dais with Senator Leahy and his remarkable, riveting new memoir, The Road Taken. Before Senator Leahy and I begin talking, I want to take one moment to talk about my voice. Because some of you are thinking, that's not the voice we know. Oh my gosh, he has laryngitis. I don't. This is my new voice from March of 2020. Thank you, COVID. I'm fine. I have a wonderful voice therapist in New York City, a former Israeli Forces Special Commando, takes no prisoners, and after our first day of working together, she said to me, Chris Bohjalian, you think I'm grim report, telling me your voice is gone. But you are Big Ham. I've watched so much video of you before you get COVID, after you get COVID. Even when your voice is total bowel movement. Even when you're all Grandpa Simpson all the time. I am going to listen to you because you have interesting things to say. So get over yourself. Also, one of the weird things about this ailment is that there's more clarity when I mimic people. And so I mimic my voice therapist a lot. And she's seen the videos of me mimicking her, and she said at one point, she said, Chris Bohjalian, you are a very good writer, but as mimic, you suck. You make me sound like a Russian hooker. So, voice stuff behind us. It is such a privilege to be here with Senator Leahy. All of us in this remarkable theater know the senator is a human being who has given an entire life to public service to Vermont, to the United States, to the world. A legislator who has always legislated, whether it is crafting laws or voting on Supreme Court justices, with one word in mind, principle. Whatever decision he makes, it is based not on partisan politics, but on his moral compass, which is not merely astute, it is perfect, and as morally sound as any human being I've ever had the privilege to meet. That's the senator we all know, but I also know this senator. The senator who is such a good sport that he doesn't mind when I would write newspaper columns wondering why have we never seen the Batman and the senator in the same room.
I saved that.
A senator who in September of 2001, while all of us were reeling from the attacks on the World Trade Center, the Pentagon in Pennsylvania, when he himself is dealing with death threats, picks up the phone to call me just to say, hang in there, keep writing your column. It means so much, even when the world is unraveling. And then there's this. This is a senator and Marcel that I know. It's 2013. I'm speaking at the Folger Shakespeare Library in Washington, D.C. It's a formal affair, so I'm wearing a tux. When I'm putting on my tuxedo pants in my hotel, I discover that, and I hadn't noticed this when I picked up the pants at the dry cleaner, the seam has gone from the inside of my crotch to my knee. So I spend the entire time at the podium standing like this. And when I'm telling the senator and Marcel this at dinner, this story, they both laugh and smile and said to me, why didn't you tell us? We could have your pants sewn. Put that on my headstone. The president pro tem of the Senate and his wife offering to sew my pants. That is a great man, and this is a great memoir. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you. We're both talking about different things that happened. He with COVID and his voice. I have no excuses for my voice, but the fact I'm sitting in the end of June, in fact, I was about to go celebrate our anniversary with our children and grandchildren, I slipped and fell as I rushed up the stairs with things to put in the suitcase. Ended up in the hospital for 31 days with replacing the same hip twice, and finally getting out of there in a wheelchair. Only recently, I started walking by Christmas time and go back to snowshoeing, doing those things, but it has been, that's why I'm not jumping up and down. But I will tell you one thing about the first day I went back to the Senate. They were going to have an all-night session with a lot of votes. And I did not want to come in there walking with a walker. So I had a wheelchair, black wheelchair. Marcel made sure she got a couple bat signals on both sides. And I rode in for the beginning of what turned out to be a 32-hour nonstop session. But thank goodness for that wheelchair going back and forth. And when the rare bipartisan times recently in the Senate, both the Republican side and the Democratic side of the Senate stood up and applauded. Well, if not me, at least Batman. But I called Batman that evening and told him, no, I thank you for being here. Chris Bohjalian is a great author. We have all his books. We've read them on the rare times when Marcel and I get a vacation. You see pictures of us in it. You see Bohjalian books there. And he's written so many, those that have made into movies or television shows. All we've seen the movie before it comes out because we read the book. And Chris, I appreciate you taking this, but I'm going to turn it over to him. He can ask any question you want. Then we're going to have a time when you can ask any question you want, and ask anything you want. I'm retiring in January. Nobody can use it against me. So.
Senator, I love the moments in this memoir on the world stage, and I love the moments on the Vermont stage. Since right now the two of us are on a Vermont stage, would you share with the audience tonight a little bit about the Vermont skinny-dipping legal kerfuffle and how it may be prepared you for the U.S. Senate?
Well, when I was state attorney in Chittenden County, there had been in the adjoining county, Washington County, a judge who did not like those hippies who were known to skinny dip in some of the surrounding areas. And one had been arrested, and he was going to make a big thing. Of course, he was out on habeas corpus in about 20 minutes. You don't prosecute for that. And we were at our tree farm in Middlesex, and a state trooper drives up. It's in the middle of a weekend, and he said, I have a matter. They need you to sign warrants. I said, what is it? He said, well, we got a call about skinny dippers. And I went to out in the country where the complainant had called, and they said, oh yes, those hippies are there. He said, you go across those fields for about 3/4 of a mile, then you come to woods, you go another 1/4 of a mile through the woods, and then you come to deep brush, you get to be very quiet going through the brush so they don't hear you. And we get in, and they're in there skinny dipping, and I am so offended. I won't arrest them. I said, don't do anything for a moment. I'll send you a memo on this. And I did. I wrote a memo saying I researched Vermonters who skinny dipped, including the history of Calvin Coolidge. I discounted those who claimed they did it in May because of the danger of frostbite in May that they were skinny dipping. And I did a number of other tongue-in-cheek things. The Senator, it was before social media, but AP picked it up. Times of London, where I wrote an editorial. The Washington Star, which is a very conservative newspaper, Republican-oriented at that time in Washington, wrote an editorial. They wished that J. Edgar Hoover had the FBI, and John Mitchell was President Nixon's Attorney General, would show the same sense of humor as this unknown prosecutor in Vermont. Now, at the time, I was vice president of the National District Attorneys Association, and our executive board had a meeting scheduled with first John Mitchell and then J. Edgar Hoover. Mitchell thought it was funnier than that. Hoover, for one thing, he didn't realize so much taller than he is. I said, "Hello, I'm Patrick Leahy." He said, "Yes, I know who you are." And, that was the beginning of a very frosty meeting. But I'm still glad I wrote the article, and I still get letters from people who dug this thing up out of the archives. So if anybody wants one, it's in the book.
The ultimate kitchen table issue, skinny dipping.
Yes.
Tell us about the title and what it means to you as a Vermonter, the road taken.
How it means to retire? Well, you know, I came there when I ran. When I announced I was 33, by the time of the election I was 34, my predecessor had been elected the year I was born to first a partial term, and then others. He'd become the longest serving senator at 34 years of anyone from Vermont. We had never, we were the only state in the Union, never elected a Democrat. Since the 17th Amendment, we'd never elected anybody under 50, and so 34-year-old Democrat would say, "Okay, kids, you can have the nomination. It's useless. Nobody else take it." I have two headlines from the area newspaper in my office. The top one, 5 days before the election, says, "Poll dooms Leahy." Made the next 5 days uncomfortable. And the next one says, "Leahy unexpectedly wins." In fact, another newspaper, their first edition said, "Mallory's election to the Senate was closer than expected." Well, yes, it was. But then I get down to the Senate, and one of the senior members of the Senate comes up to me and goes, "Boy, how old are you?" And I said, "I'll be 35 next year." And does anybody ever tell you you're too young to be in the United States Senate at 35? And I got my Irish-Italian temper up a little bit, and I said, "Yeah, my opponent for one." he loved it because I didn't back down. Everybody else backed down to him, and we got along fine after that. But I came there knowing that we're, well, now the second smallest state in the Union. And if we want a real strong voice in Washington, it'd have to be in the U.S. Senate. And I pledged to do whatever I could do for Vermonters. I've always had a listed home phone number. Marcel and I hear all the time until I had the accident, and get to see people, hear what's on their mind, answer questions. And that's the best way to be a senator. Those who just go by what's the poll, the political fancy at the time, they never accomplish anything. If you come in and say, you know, here's what I stand for, but I'll listen to you, and they know you're going to independently make up your mind, the people will trust you.
You talk about a particular photograph in your book that's very, very important to you, a photograph you took, because you're an immensely talented photographer. And I know immensely talented photographers.
You're married to one.
I'm married to one, yeah. Would you tell the audience about that photograph and why you took it and what it means to you?
It's using black and white film in a refugee camp in Central America. I've been down there to one of the internal wars, and I went in this camp. I'd ask people if they'd mind if I took pictures, because I won't go in a situation like that when they're basically in a helpless situation, stick a camera in their face. I ask them first. And one man stepped forward. He's probably 60 years old, hair white whiskers. He just stared straight at me, in Washington. I took his picture. I got back and developed it. I have this picture of this man. What I see is, you're a powerful country. You can do things for people. I can never do anything to help you. You don't know my name. You can't speak my language. But what are you going to do to help people like me? And I put it over my desk, and I call it my conscience picture. Because every time I look up from the desk, he's looking me right in the eye and saying, what do you do for people who could never do anything for you but need your help? And that's hung for decades in my office. And I have a good friend, and I don't mean this as name dropping because he's used my office all the time. He's heard the story. He said, Pat, I want to see your picture. And I said, Bono, sit right here. He sat there, looked up and started to get up, sat right back down. He said, I can't take my eyes off it. I took the one off the wall, gave it to my reprinted another one, replaced it. And so that's hanging in Dublin. But the one hanging there in Washington looks at me every day. And when I leave office, that will come with me. And for the rest of my life, it would be looking at me.
You mentioned a few minutes ago the importance of principle and letting people know where you stand. There's a moment in the memoir, in the run-up to the Bush-Cheney war in Iraq, in which you're looking at some intelligence, and then as if it were a Robert Ludlum novel, some joggers appear. That's a riveting story. Would you share that story?
Certainly. We, our home, is a farm, tree farm in Middlesex, but in Washington we also have a home in McLean, Virginia. And Marcel and I like to go out walking in the morning, and we're out walking in our neighborhood, and two joggers come up. And we recognize just about everybody in the neighborhood, never seen them before, two fit young joggers. Good morning, Senator. Good morning, Mrs. Leahy. They said good morning. Senator, I heard at that briefing with Vice President Cheney and others about why we should go to war in Iraq. You had some serious questions. I said, well, if I was such a briefing, it'd be closed, and I couldn't talk about it. Understood, sir. But did they show you file number 8? That's not the word they used the code word. You can see by the look at my face, I wasn't going to answer if I hadn't seen it. He said, you should look at file number 8. So I went right back to our secured room and asked to see file number 8. They brought it to me in a locked briefcase. I read it. It spoke against much of what Cheney and the others had said. So I was somewhat disturbed by that, and we're out walking. 2 days later, good morning, Senator. Good morning, Mrs. Leahy. The same joggers. I said, good morning. We understand you read file number 8, and I wasn't going to talk about it. I said, well, I understood. But did they show you file number 12? And I said, holy something. And so I went and got file number 12. And totally contradicted all the claims of weapons of mass destruction and all. So I told myself that, and my staff, I'm going to vote against the war, and start putting together my points and so on. We go to church. Sunday, we're out walking about 1.5 miles from our house. 2 black cars, one armored, tents all over, pull up. Window goes down on one, and it was somebody high up in the Bush administration. Hi, Pat. Hi, Marcel. Hi. Can I talk to you a minute? So all the security people get out of the car. I get in the car with them. He said, I know you've read 8 and 12. I said, I have, as have you. And he said, you still going to vote against the war? I said, yes. He said, well, can we still be friends? I said, yes, but you're wrong on this one. So, okay. So I started down the car. He said, we'll give you a ride home. I said, well, let me tell you where I live. We know. Some things you don't forget occur. What I ordered for lunch yesterday, I might forget. But that one, I'll never forget.
I told the senator that that is the best name for a novel ever in history. We know where you live. Also, it's important to note that this story, the secure room, was not Mar-a-Lago.
I don't think there's any secure room in Mar-a-Lago. Sorry, that's a political comment.
We speak a lot about political divisiveness these days, but on January 6th, 2021, that was not the first time that your life was in literal danger. What is it like when someone mails you or your staff anthrax?
Well, I still have nightmares about that. Somebody had been mailing anthrax letters. They killed a news person in Florida and killed a woman in Connecticut whose mail had touched an envelope that had anthrax in it. And one had come to me, had been misdirected because the zip codes are very similar to the State Department, where somebody picked it up and said, oh, this letter's addressed to Senator Leahy, tossed it back in his pile. He died. He just touched the outside of the envelope that was meant for me. It was a pretty chilling thing. I mean, I had threats when I was state's attorney, but they went away, but usually the ones in prison. But this really was frightening because it could affect my whole family and all of that. When I got the call on the way home from the director of the FBI, he said, well, we had two bits of news. One is, we knew there was another letter somewhere. We just found it. I said, oh, don't tell me what the other part of it. He said, I'm sorry, but it is addressed to you. And he said, and I tried my cell phone. He said, you see some cars outside your house. They're ours. And for a couple of years, had security. Where to go, they at first thought they had, the person did it, turned out they didn't. And then the person who mailed it, I assume mailed it, he committed suicide. So we never found out for sure why me and Tom Daschle and Tom Brokaw. The three of us were sent the letters. And I've always felt that there are other people involved with it because of the complexity of the anthrax. I mean, there are forms of anthrax, but this, the deadliest, is outlawed by every country that outlaws poison gas or poison weapons. So that was kind of a sobering thing. And we actually, in the family, I don't know why I write this in the book, but we talked about, do I want to stay in this job? Do I want to be here or go back home where it's nice and safe? Decided to stay because there were so many things I wanted to do for Vermont and could do in the world, and I wasn't going to let it scare me away. Now, as President Pro Tem, of course, being third in line to the presidency at the times I've been President Pro Tem, a large and wonderful security team comes with me. They're some of the best men and women you can imagine. The president did ask me how I felt being third in line. I said, listen, I prayed for your safety before. I pray twice as much now.
Which is more sobering? The anthrax from 2001 or the insurrection in 2021 not just as a senator, but as a human being who was witness to the insurrection and then would serve presiding over the second impeachment of Donald J. Trump?
I got to tell you, looking back at it, there's no question in my mind January 6th was more disturbing. And it was because it wasn't threatening me, it was threatening the whole country. It was threatening our Constitution. Brave police officers died from that. Other people were severely injured during that by people claiming we got a constitutional right to storm in here with weapons. They've never even read the Constitution. They wouldn't recognize it if they saw it. And to think that was coming in, I know I was sitting there in the Senate chamber. So many people rushed in, rushed Mike Pence, Vice President Pence, off the presiding chair. And I looked to my side, and here's a police officer in the chambers with a machine gun and saying, we have to get you out of here. We don't, even my security team doesn't come on the floor of the Senate. The Vice President's security team don't come on the floor of the Senate. But everybody was there this time. And as we were being rushed to a secure area, all the senators, Republicans and Democrats, and then getting there, turning on the TV and saying, what the heck is going on? It was frightening. And I remember at one point somebody pointed out that we could, as senators, we could vote to have the Senate meet anywhere we want. We could, by majority votes, agree to meet here, the Senate, in this beautiful room. But I stood up and said, no. We knew they had to use bombs, sniffing dogs on clear the Senate. I said, no, even if we have to see it till midnight, I want the American people to see the United States Senate not cowering in a secure area somewhere, but on the floor of the Senate, where anybody can turn on their TV set and see what each senator is saying and how they're voting. I said, I'm the dean of the Senate. That's what I'm telling you. All the senators there, virtually all, Republican and Democrat, applauded and said, yes, we agree. And we sat there for several hours. But when we were back in session, anybody in America, whether they agreed with us or not, could see us there. But I think it was one of the most serious threats in my lifetime to the country, to our stability, to our Constitution, and then to see what has continued on afterward. That's why I said, I've got to write this book.
I'm going to ask one more question. Tom just gave me your questions, but there's one question I really want to ask. One of the great things about your book is how you talk about what the Senate was and what it can be. And there's a riveting scene with you, President Obama, then Vice President Biden, Senators McConnell and Cornyn, and you're talking about a Supreme Court nomination. And it is a fascinating scene, and it gets to how partisan the Senate has become. In the days when a Supreme Court justice might be approved 99-1 or 99-0 are gone. Do you see hope for the U.S. Senate?
In the short term, no. And I can't tell you how much that pains me to say that. But I'm hoping as people read some of the lessons in here, people who have just been elected to the Senate, or people who are in the Senate, realize it could be better. And if it doesn't, I mean, the Senate was never perfect, but is a lot better, is a lot closer to being the conscience of the nation, which, you know, after all, there's 100 of them for 325 million Americans. It is a privilege being there. And we should think of the country first, not of ourselves or how we get on TV or anything else. I'm hoping they'll realize we're hurting terribly if we let it be politicized. We're hurting if our courts allow themselves to be politicized. And I see that happening more and more. And I voted for a lot of Republican nominees, as well as Democratic nominees to the courts, from the district court up to the Supreme Court. Back when I think it was Ted Cruz was saying, well, Democrats never vote for Republican nominees. I said, name one Republican on the Judiciary Committee that's voted for as many Republican nominees as I had. He changed the subject.
Okay, these are questions from the audience. And I'll just go through them. Tom handed them to me. Is Russia as frightening to you as it is to me? Will Russia use nuclear weapons? What will be our response?
Well, this third line, I get briefings on this, so I'm going to be very general. Putin is a war criminal. He's become unstable, as many of his close associates are now saying publicly, unstable mentally. Some of the oligarchs who initially spoke up against him suddenly had fatal accidents.
11.
Yes. Fell out a window or ate something that killed them. And I mean, this man has bombed hospitals with the mark on the roof, all making sure they're in hospital. Bombed schools with children in it. Had whole families machine gun walking down the street. That's a war criminal. What he might do with nuclear weapons is one of the largest stores of nuclear weapons, from they call tactical weapons to long-range missiles. What he might do, his own inner circle is not sure. I think if he did, it would open a whole new era in the world. It could be cataclysmic. I realize that's a very general answer, but it's one I worry about. And it's one many people, both parties in the Senate, worry about. I don't know the answer. I mean, it's a good question. I don't know the answer. I wish I did. Either way, if it is to be used, there is no good response. No matter what happens, it's always going to be escalation.
Who do you think will control the Senate in 2023? Another one of those magic 8-ball questions.
Well, I have, in 22 different midterm or elections, election cycles. I mean, senators have 6-year terms, but a third of us are up every 2 years. I've called it right in all but one. And so everybody wants to know my prediction. I usually write it down about this time, put it in a sealed envelope, and give it to somebody, and they come back when they open it and say, darn, you were right. This one, I've gone back and forth. 2 months ago, I thought the Democrats would be in the minority. Now I think we'd be in the majority by one. But things can change so quickly. So many things have been accomplished, so much has been done on COVID to help people in healthcare and schools and everything else. You'd think it'd be easy. But what is going to be the latest thing online or something to change it? So I'm not trying to duck your question. I don't know the answer. I feel more and more comfortable with the 51. But when you're getting that close, one race. I will admit this, when it looked like we were going to be in the minority this last time, and we were staying up late to see the votes in Georgia, and which would decide whether we were in the majority. And I had an early thing the next morning. I said, look, I'm going to bed. And my son comes in. She got up early and wakes me up, and she said, good morning, President Pro Tem. We won. I said, but, and this with all due respect, these wonderful people protect me. I said, but we really don't, it's safe enough here. We don't need the security. Now, a couple hours later, we're being rushed by armed guards to this secure room as the people are storming the Capitol. I get a text from Marcel. She said, what was that you said when I woke you up about not needing security? I said, you sure that was me? And after 60 years of marriage, I think she was sure it was me.
Tonight, my lovely bride, Victoria Bluer, in your honor, is wearing maple earrings for Vermont and a bracelet she bought in Cuba. You've accomplished an enormous amount as a senator for Vermont, for the United States, for the world. What are some of your accomplishments you're most proud of?
Well, I've kept my word, and I've cast more votes than all but 2 people in the history of this country. I could go back through them and find one and say, what the heck was I thinking? But generally, I'm very proud because I kept my word, cast difficult votes. I like the fact that sitting at a farmer's table, kitchen table in Vermont, we first heard about the difficulties to have organic farming and have a certification that really is organic. Went back and spent 3 years past the first organic bill. Some poo-pooed it, it's crunchy granola, it wouldn't go anywhere. It's a $60 billion industry in the United States now. Some crunchy, some granola. But, so I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of passing a law to ban the export of landmines. I'm very proud of the Leahy War Victims Fund, which has helped countries all over the world from war victims. We even used it mostly from landmines, we even used it in Haiti during the last earthquake to help people who lost limbs down there. Now, I'll never forget I told you, Chris, earlier, story of the famous orthopedic surgeon who at his own cost came from Belgium to spend 3 weeks helping with people who lost limbs. He had now stayed 3 months. He was staying even longer, even though it jeopardized his own practice. Not getting paid or anything. And I asked him, why are you doing this? He grabbed my arm. I asked him in French. He grabbed my arm. He said, Senator, pour les enfants, pour les enfants, for the children, for the children. And I thought, and he's using a program that I started. And that meant a lot to me. I like to think there's a lot of others, we put money in education. I want children to be educated wherever they are. We've done things to stop racial bias. When I rewrote the Violence Against Women Act, I added the LGBTQ community in there. I added Native Americans who were not in the first Violence Against Women Act. And then, as we were about to vote on it, I said, I have a little amendment here, this big, but it went after sex traffickers with children and dramatically increased the resources to catch them. And this former prosecutor made the penalties very, very high for such traffickers.
Two more.
Okay, I'll keep it short.
Okay. This is one of those meaning of life questions with no easy answers, but it's a great question. How can we return civility to politics?
Oh, boy, at least even with a divided Senate, at least we have rules. It keeps some semblance of civility, even though some people have a hard time faking sincerity. And you got that. But if we don't, I mean, I hear some of these talk shows, I don't care on the right or the left, everybody's wrong. I only had the answer. Well, nobody do that. You know this in all the books you've read. A lot of them leave questions. How do you respond to this? Because in life, there are questions. And you have that beautifully in your books. You make people, I know Marcel and I, when we read it, we have to draw the conclusion, well, who's right on this and who's wrong? But treat it as though nobody has the absolute answer. Show some respect for people. I know my parents did, growing up in Montpelier. My Italian grandparents, when they emigrated to Vermont, they insisted on that, their children. My Irish grandparents were not alive when I was, so I didn't know them. But they certainly passed off to my father as the Italian ones to my mother, that you show civility. And the country is better when you read a lot of the histories of presidents, and some characterize them this way or that way. And then you read some of the histories of people who knew them personally and understood how they had struggled to bring people together, both Republicans and Democrats. We've got to go back to that.
In the history of the U.S. Senate, and I think I know the answer to this, but how many senators served more years than you? Who are they?
2 out of 1,900. Dan Inouye and Bob Byrd.
I was 0 for 2.
Huh?
I was wrong on both.
Oh, were you?
Yeah, I was thinking, yes, I was completely wrong.
Well, but they died in office. Marcel, I'm not going to die in office. We want to come home.